Faith is the only thing that still has value in a world this broken. The faithful are spent easily, used up, and discarded. I still remember the day they came for me. They weren't the usual officials with their papers and quotas. Not the clerks who counted every body like another item on a list. No, these were different. The ones who stood silently behind them in their dark red uniforms. They didn't need to speak. Their presence alone was enough to make anyone obey. Everyone knew who they were. Commissars, the emperor's judgment given human form. Back then, I was just another worker. 17 years old, born in Hive Tetragon. Like my parents and their parents before them. Every day was the same. 12 long hours. Maintaining the giant stamping machines. That built parts for lost guns. I'd never seen the sky. I wasn't even sure it really existed. The stars were just stories in old propaganda leaflets we passed. Around the sleeping quarters. When the tithe came, our world's share of soldiers demanded by the Imperium, I wasn't afraid. I was excited. I thought I was being given a chance to escape. To prove that I was worth something. The sermons that echoed through the factory speakers had filled my mind with ideas of glory and honor. I believed every word. They taught us that duty was holy, that sacrifice gave life meaning. I repeated those words so many times that I thought I understood them. I didn't. That day, they processed 500 of us, just from our block alone. A tiny fraction of what the hive owed. We stood in lines while machines scanned our eyes and priests brushed oil on our foreheads, muttering prayers none of us understood. When they pressed the metal brand of the Aquila into my palm, the burn felt like a blessing. That's what I'd been told to believe. After that, I stopped being a person. They gave me a code instead of a name. TRXV78293J. From that moment on, I belonged to the Imperium. My body was just another piece of equipment to be used where it was needed most. And, Emperor forgive me, I was proud of that. The next part of my memory comes in fragments. They packed us into enormous ships meant for cargo, not people. Thousands of us crammed together in the dark. I don't know how long we were in transit. Weeks, maybe months. There were no windows. No clocks. Only the deep vibration of the engines and the constant drone of prayers echoing through the loudspeakers. Disease spread quickly. People died quietly beside me, one after another. Servitors removed the bodies with cold precision, and I assumed they were tossed into space. No prayers for them. No record. They had failed before even reaching the battlefield. When we finally landed, the air outside stung my lungs. The sky was a dirty yellow, thick with pollution that felt familiar and yet wrong. We were on another world, a place I later learned was called Kaeldar Secundus, an industrial planet torn apart by war. Training began immediately, but not with guns, as I expected. With prayer, we knelt for hours in the mud, repeating verses until our voices gave out. If anyone stopped, they were beaten. If they collapsed, they were dragged away, never to return. Then came the physical trials, running until we vomited, carrying weights until our backs felt broken, surviving the cold, the heat, the hunger. Many died. Their deaths meant nothing. Their names were never spoken again, only when our bodies were properly reshaped. When we were more machine than man, did they place a weapon in our hands for the first time. You handed me an old rifle, nothing glamorous. A battered service piece that had clearly belonged to dozens before me. Its markings were almost gone from years of use. The armory tech who issued it called it a sacred tool of duty. To me, it felt like something strange and terrible. I had never held a weapon before. Our unit's commissar was a tall, gaunt man named Korenval. His face was a map of scar tissue, and his left eye had been replaced with a dull, mechanical lens that glowed red in the dark. He rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone obeyed. On that first morning, he told us bluntly, "You are not soldiers yet. You are raw material, or to be burned down and forged clean by pain. Many of you will not survive." That was the point. We learned fast. We took the rifle apart and put it back together with our eyes closed. We said prayers while we oiled moving parts, as if sanctifying the metal could make it less lethal. Priests prodded at our minds with ritual tests. If you failed, you were punished. If you hesitated, you were corrected until the doubt was gone. The hardest lesson was how to kill without feeling. In the third month, they handed each of us a condemned prisoner and told us to do what needed doing. Mine was an old man, gray, gaunt, past caring. No one told us his crime. The order itself was instruction enough. When I raised the rifle, the old man didn't flinch. There was a look in his eyes I still remember, not fear, but disappointment, as though he'd expected better of us. I fired. The beam cut through him cleanly. He collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I felt nothing. That numbness told me the training had worked. By the 6th month, only a fraction of us remained. The rest had been worn down, broken, or killed. Those of us left moved together like one body. Our names faded. Our purpose did not. We lived to obey. Our first mission came soon after. A separatist group had seized a critical factory. We were ordered to retake it and to preserve the machinery. At all costs. The human cost didn't matter. We advanced through the factory, disciplined, silent, with Commissar Vol pacing behind us and a bolt pistol in his hand, watching for any sign of hesitation. At first, the resistance was weak. Civilians pressed into defending the place. They fell quickly to coordinated fire. I remember stepping over their bodies, ordinary men and women in work clothes, not unlike the ones I'd worn in the stamping halls. Some clutched crude weapons. Some had nothing. A small, unfamiliar ache stirred inside me, not quite doubt, not quite remorse, just the recognition that they had once been like me. Vol appeared at my side without warning, his mechanical eye catching the dim light. "They are not people," he said, low and harsh. "They are obstacles to what must be done." I gave the answer that had been drilled into me and forced my focus. Back to the mission. Deeper inside the complex, the fight hardened. These defenders were no longer improvised. They were organized and armed. Lost fire cracked from fortified positions. Explosives tore through our ranks. The factory became a maze of smoke, shredding metal, and shouting. We pushed forward because that was the only thing we had been taught to do: advance, obey, survive. At the end of that day, we held the factory. The machines were intact. The cost in bodies was enormous. Standing amid the wrecked assembly lines, watching co-workers carried away on stretchers, I felt the truth of what I'd become settle over me like a second skin. We had been reshaped into instruments of duty, efficient, obedient, unquestioning. The line between man and tool had been crossed, and there was no going back. Men I had trained beside for months died screaming around me. But we kept moving forward. We had to. To stop was to invite a bullet from our own commissar. Better to fall to the enemy than to be executed for hesitation. Time meant nothing during the fighting. The hours blended together into flashes of noise and color, the stench of burned flesh and ozone, the endless hum of lost fire, the muttered prayers slipping from my lips without thought. My armor felt like paper against the storm of shots that rained around us. When the battle finally ended, the factory was ours. Of the 120 soldiers who went in, fewer than 40 were still standing. The enemy was gone, every last one of them. There had never been any plan to take prisoners. Commissar Vol stood before us, his uniform spotless while the rest of us were soaked in blood and grime. "You have served the Emperor well," he said. "But do not mistake this for glory. Millions have done the same. Millions more will follow. You are not heroes. You are tools. Nothing more, nothing less." His words should have broken what little pride we had left. But instead they confirmed what we already knew. We lived to serve. That was the only meaning left to us. That night, as I scrubbed the blood and scorch marks from my rifle, a realization took hold. The Imperium didn't need my faith or my understanding. It didn't care whether I believed in what we were doing. It only needed me to obey, to kill when ordered, and to die when required. And that I could do. In the months that followed, our regiment was sent from one battle to the next across Kaldar Secundus. The missions blurred together, crushing worker uprisings, purging mutants from abandoned districts, executing supposed heretics in front of terrified crowds. Each job felt the same: dirty, necessary, endless. Our numbers kept shrinking. Some were killed in combat. Others were consumed by disease in the filthy camps we called bases. A few were executed for mistakes so small they barely registered, a misplaced word, a second's hesitation, a weapon left uncleaned. Commissar Vol's discipline was absolute. New recruits arrived to replace the dead, fresh faces who looked at us with wide eyes, still clinging to ideas of honor and courage. We said nothing to correct them. The truth would reveal itself soon enough, as it had for us, through blood and loss. I lived where others didn't. Not because I was strong or brave, but because I had learned the secret of survival, complete surrender. I gave up my past, my doubts, even my name. I became what they wanted me to be, an unthinking instrument of the Emperor's will. I killed without question. I endured without complaint. I whispered the holy prayers as I was taught, their meaning long since hollowed out. After 18 months of that, our orders changed. The rebellion on Kaeldar was done. The factories were running again. We were shipped out once more, crammed into transports like ammunition, being moved to the next front. Our destination was a planet called Dravaris. Once, it had been rich with farmland and green fields. Now it was something else entirely, a world poisoned by the touch of chaos. The moment we stepped from the ship, I knew this war would be different. The sky itself looked diseased, swollen clouds, twisting above in bruised shades of purple and gray, pulsing with veins of lightning that burned violet after images into my eyes. Here, we weren't fighting rebels or workers. We were facing something far worse, soldiers like us, twisted by corruption, backed by creatures that should never have existed. This was no longer a war for control. It was a war for the soul. The air itself felt wrong. Every breath was a struggle, heavy with scents that made no sense, sweet and rotten, floral and acrid all at once. My lungs burned, but there was nowhere else to draw breath. We built our forward post in what had once been a farming village. The buildings were mostly intact, but everything about them felt distorted. Doors opened onto blank walls. Windows showed impossible skies. When you pressed your hand to the stone, it was warm and pliant, like skin rather than wood or concrete. The commissar's orders were simple: cleanse the area. In practice, it meant fire. We moved from house to house, soaking everything in promethium and igniting it with lost fire. The flames didn't burn the way normal flames should. They shifted between green, blue, and purple, twisting in shapes that hurt to look at. The smoke rose thick and black, carrying the smell of charred meat, even though we'd found no bodies. Watching one large structure collapse into itself, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just destroying buildings. We were burning away a wound in the world itself. That night, as we dug in around the smoldering ruins, something new crept into me. Not the passing flicker of doubt I'd felt on Kaeldar, but something heavier, deeper. A question: what if we weren't the righteous ones here? What if the Imperium, for all its sermons, was just another power clawing at a galaxy that didn't care about us at all? The thought was poison. Dangerous. I stopped it before it could fully form. On Dravaris, I'd seen what doubt led to: the warped faces of cultists, the madness in their eyes as they hurled themselves at our guns, praising things I dared not name. Better a slave to the Imperium than a servant of whatever horrors they worshipped. So I tried to smother my questions. During my watch shifts, I whispered prayers until my throat was raw. I polished my rifle with ritual precision, anointing every part with the sacred oils. I volunteered for the worst patrols, hoping my actions would silence the treachery of my own thoughts. The commissar noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "You're troubled, Guardsman Van," he said during an inspection, the first time he'd ever used my name. The fact that he knew it at all unnerved me. "No, Commissar," I lied. "I'm focused on my duty." His red augmetic eye clicked and whirred as it studied me. "There are two kinds of men in the Guard," he said. "Those who accept the truth of what they are, and those who fight it. The first find peace. The second suffer needlessly before ending up in the same place." I said nothing. "You're at a crossroads," he continued. "Every guardsman reaches it sooner or later. You must decide: become what the Imperium needs you to be, or cling to what's left of yourself. Choose carefully." Then he walked on, leaving me with a cold knot in my stomach. I hadn't realized how obvious my struggle had become. If the commissar could see it, who else could? Were my fellow guardsmen watching me, waiting for the sign of weakness that would justify a bolt round to the skull? That night I made a choice. I would cut out my doubt. I would stop pretending to be anything other than what I was, a tool. My thoughts, my feelings, my humanity, they didn't matter. Only obedience mattered. For a time, that decision worked. I became precise, mechanical, efficient. In the months that followed, I fought in countless engagements against the forces of chaos, returning each time with new scars, but my resolve intact. I watched my comrades fall one by one, some to enemy fire, others to something far worse. The corruption that poisoned Dravaris crept into men's minds and bodies alike. Some lost their sanity and turned their weapons on us before being gunned down. Others simply vanished during patrols, swallowed by the tainted landscape. A few weren't so lucky. Their bodies began to twist, bones warping, skin turning strange shades that marked them as touched by chaos. We executed them without hesitation, burned their remains, and erased their names from the rolls. Mercy had no place here. Through it all, I forced myself to focus only on the immediate. The next patrol, the next skirmish, the next prayer. Thinking beyond the moment was a luxury no one could afford. Then came the Battle of Halliford. Halliford had once been a massive agricultural hub, a maze of silos and warehouses that had fed entire systems. Now it was a fortress of corruption, a rotting heart from which chaos spread across Dravaris. Our orders were simple: retake it, no matter the cost. The assault began at what passed for dawn. On Dravaris, the sun was little more than a rumor behind clouds that never cleared. The darkness only shifted from black to gray, offering no comfort, no light. We advanced across open ground in tight formation, thousands of guardsmen moving as one. Artillery thundered behind us, hurling shells that exploded among the twisted structures ahead. Each blast sent up clouds of tainted dust that glowed with unnatural colors before fading into the gloom. The enemy's reply came fast and brutal. Bolts of plasma and heavy weapon fire tore into our lines. Men were ripped apart, their armor shattered, their screams lost in the chaos. What had begun as an orderly advance dissolved into a desperate scramble for cover. I threw myself behind the burned-out shell of a Chimera transport, its metal hide scarred and melted from countless hits. Next to me crouched a young recruit, shaking so badly his rifle rattled in his hands. "Emperor, protect us," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm of gunfire. "Please, Emperor, protect us." Before I could speak, a heavy bolter round slammed into the wreck above us. The blast sent shards of metal flying. A hot sting sliced across my cheek, but I was still alive. The boy wasn't. A jagged piece of shrapnel had torn into his neck. Blood poured out in violent bursts, soaking his armor. His eyes met mine, wide, terrified, confused. He tried to say something, but only a wet gurgle escaped his throat before his body went still. I felt nothing. No grief, no rage. Not even the numb professionalism that had guided me through so many battles. Only emptiness. And in that emptiness, I understood what Commissar Crane had meant. I had reached the crossroads he warned me about, and I had already chosen my path. My humanity was gone, burned away by faith, fear, and duty. A man couldn't survive Dravaris with a human heart. The company Vox crackled to life. "All units, advance. The Emperor demands victory. Any man caught retreating will be executed." I rose without hesitation, rifle ready. Around me, the survivors did the same. Together we pushed forward through mud thick with blood and shredded flesh. We stepped over the fallen without looking down. The battle raged for 18 hours. By the end, I had drained 6 power packs. My armor hung in tatters, and my uniform was stiff with dried blood, most of it not mine. My throat burned from hours of shouting, battle cries, prayers, and half-remembered litanies that had long since lost any true meaning. They were just sounds now, a rhythm to keep me from thinking. Out of the 3,000 guardsmen who began the assault, fewer than 500 were still standing when Halliford finally fell. The cost was staggering, but command declared it a victory. The corrupted heart of Dravaris was ours again. We swept through the ruined complex, purging room after room of any remaining resistance. The air was thick with the stench of promethium and decay. It was during this sweep that I found something that would haunt me during the rare hours when the suppressants wore off and dreams slipped through. The control chamber was filled with the dead. Chaos cultists sprawled in a perfect circle around one figure at the center. He was different from the rest. His uniform, though defiled with symbols I couldn't bear to look at for long, was unmistakably Imperial. An officer's jacket, torn and stained, but still recognizable. When I looked closer, my stomach turned cold. Beneath the twisted scars and unnatural growths, I knew that face. Lieutenant Merrick. Our lieutenant. He'd gone missing 3 weeks earlier after a patrol ambush. We'd assumed he was dead. We were wrong. He'd been claimed. As I stood frozen, trying to make sense of it, Commissar Crane stepped beside me. His mechanical eye clicked and focused on the scene, expression unreadable. "This," he said softly, "is why we fight. This is what becomes of humanity when we falter." He was one of ours, I heard myself say, though my voice sounded far away. He was weak, Crane replied, his tone as sharp as a blade. He let doubt in. Doubt breeds questions. Questions breed heresy. And heresy breeds this. He gestured toward what was left of Merrick. I nodded because I had no answer. If a man like Merrick, an officer, educated, devoted, could fall to chaos, what chance did I have? What chance did any of us? "Burn it," Crane ordered. "Purge everything." So we did. We flooded the complex with promethium and set it alight. The flames rose high into the tainted sky, bright enough to be seen for miles. We stood watching in silence as the fire consumed everything: bodies, memories, sins. The heat washed over us, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something I didn't expect. Pride. Not pride in myself, but in what I represented. I was nothing more than a cog in the great machine of the Imperium. But the machine had won today. Through sacrifice and obedience, we had driven back the darkness, if only for a while. The feeling faded quickly. When the fire died and the ash settled, I felt nothing again. Just the dull emptiness that had become my constant companion. We gathered our dead, burned what was left, and salvaged whatever equipment still worked. Then came new orders. The war for Dravaris wasn't done. It was only beginning. Weeks later, what was left of us was merged with other shattered regiments. New name, new command, same mission. We became the 107th. Dravaris Purification Force, a title that left no doubt about our purpose. Cleanse the world. Sector by sector, inch by inch. Our ranks were a mix of battered veterans and terrified replacements, fresh from distant worlds and unprepared for what awaited them here. Somehow, I was promoted to corporal, not for skill or valor, but simply because I had survived. My new duty was to train the newcomers. I taught them how to spot corruption in the land, in the air, and in each other, how to maintain their weapons, how to stay alive long enough to be useful, and how to stop asking questions.